Hi, colleagues. So my name is David Bass. I'm Advance AG's Director of EDI, and I'm here to talk about our three-part leadership series on academic freedom, freedom of speech, and EDI. I'm joined by Naomi, who is the author of our most recent article, and I'll let Naomi introduce herself.
Hi, David. Hi, colleagues. I'm Naomi Waltham-Smith. I'm currently a professor at the University of Oxford and a tutorial fellow at Merton College. Until recently, I was chair of the Academic Freedom Review Committee at the University of Warwick, where I did quite a lot of work on academic freedom and free speech.
Thanks, Naomi. So Naomi's written an article on championing academic freedom and about why the sector really should be proactive in valuing and defending academic freedom. So, Naomi, can you tell us a little bit about why you wanted to write this article and what your main point is?
Yeah, I think my main message really is that academic freedom is qualitatively different from freedom of expression, and this point isn't always well appreciated. I think the UK higher education sector needs to come together to find effective ways to protect that distinctiveness, because it really is the lifeblood of what we do in higher education and also the role of the sector in a democratic society. So academic freedom is, unlike free speech, discerning as to the quality of expression. And sometimes we explain this in terms of disciplinary norms or the pursuit of truth or advancing knowledge. But to my mind, perhaps the most effective way to delimit, circumscribe academic freedom of expression is that it must be amenable to critique, to refinement, to rebuttal, to correction by other members of the academic community. So in other words, things like propaganda, sophistry, dogmatism, conspiracy theory don't merit the kind of enhanced level of protection that the European Convention on Human Rights and its case law gives to academic freedom of expression. And I think the other main message that I'd want to bring out is that by emphasizing criticality in this way, it's because academic freedom serves a particular purpose in a democracy, to question and to enrich not only what we know, but also how we know and the ways we come to know. And I think that's how it makes common purpose with the goals of equality, diversity, and inclusion. Because academic freedom, its objectives are best achieved through diversity in ways of thinking, and marginalizing certain ways of thinking is going to be an obstacle to critical understanding because it will suppress novel or innovative or simply unfamiliar ways of thinking.
Thanks, Naomi. So this is obviously something that is central to our sector all the time. It's particularly important and pertinent at the moment with the recent legislation in England and for our sector's ability to process and comment on current events. Is there anything that you'd really recommend that we do as a sector or any practice that you'd like to suggest that we pick up?
So I think we should cultivate academic spaces as spaces to disagree well with one another and understand one another well, but also be prepared to critique and challenge ideas, though not the dignity of the person. But I think above all, institutions should be coming together across the sector to try and articulate a common definition and understanding of academic freedom. The definition in English law in the new Act is quite thin and quite generic. And I think something like a voluntary code developed by the sector in consultation with the regulator and other stakeholders would really fill this gap. And it could draw on the case law of the European Court of Human Rights that has quite a supple and nuanced understanding of how to balance academic freedom of expression with other rights. But also it could draw on a number of international instruments, such as the UNESCO recommendation, that gives quite a nuanced understanding of the rights and responsibilities that academics have and how that's understood by the academic community. So I'd urge the sector really to work with the OFS on the implementation of the legislation at the same time as developing this self-understanding of academic freedom.
Thanks, Naomi. Your article actually prompted quite a bit of discussion internally at Advance AG with a couple of the colleagues that I shared it with. And one of the questions that we had was, where can people go if they want to learn more? Do you have any recommended reading that you'd like to suggest?
So this could go on a long time, but I would start off by saying to get a grip really of what the law is saying in terms of balancing rights. It's quite complex, but there are some really useful guides, both case law and thematic guides, provided by the European Convention on Human Rights knowledge sharing platform. They're regularly updated and they show the kind of subtlety of the judgments that the court has produced in balancing the different rights. And then outside of the sort of strictly legal literature, I think there's some interesting thought pieces, and I could name a few of those that I think might be interesting for leaders to read, not necessarily agree with, but to provoke thinking. So one of them is an article by philosopher Amir Srivasan in the London Review of Books on cancel culture, and another would be by lawyer James Murray in Current Legal Problems, that also looks at the quality aspects of academic freedom. And then for a broader kind of global perspective, I think there's some really interesting work being done by Liviu Matei, who was the provost at CEU and is now professor of higher education and public policy at King's. And he's been doing some really excellent work on bringing together a more global, common understanding of academic freedom.
Thank you, Naomi. Certainly have a read of the article and look out for more entries in this series.